Welcome to the What Good Looks Like podcast, where we shine the spotlight on organizations and leaders who are truly living out what it means to champion the message and the work of purpose in the marketplace today. I'm your host, Davin Salvagno.
I think the biggest barrier to most people, and particularly leaders, is fear. It's just fear. They're afraid that if they give a lot of gratitude, they give a lot of recognition, that somehow it diminishes them. That, well, if my team is so great, what do they need me for?
Welcome back to the What Good Looks Like podcast. Today, I'm here with Chester Elton. He is recognized as one of the world global gurus on leadership, multi-best-selling author with his colleague, Adrian Gostick. He's become a great friend of mine, and I am excited for this conversation today. If you have not heard Chester speak, if you've not read his work, you are in for a treat today. Chester, thank you so much for joining us today.
Davin, always a pleasure. This is going to be fun.
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait. It's, we spent some pretty great time together last May at the Purpose Summit. I still have your talk on repeat in my head as a soundtrack to my life. We talk about it all the time in the office. In fact, it's become, kind of how you quote your favorite movies. We're quoting Chester Elton all day long around the office. And your books, Leading with Gratitude, Anxiety and Work, so good, so profound and needed in this time. And talk to us a little bit, if you could, just about this journey that you've been on, because I don't want to assume that everyone knows who you are or knows your work, although I know that most do. I'd like you to give a proper introduction of kind of, how you got in this space, how you led on this journey and the work that you're doing.
Sure. Now, thank you for that. Adrian and I, we worked together at a bigger company. I was in sales. Adrian was in the communications department. And I grew up in a ridiculously happy home. My dad was just a hail fellow, well met. He was the kind of guy you wanted to be around, not because you thought he was so amazing, but because after you spent time with him, you thought you were so amazing. He just had that impact on people. I have 4 older brothers that I love dearly, and as I started to get into business and do a bunch of stuff, and Adrian had much the same situation, is we all had jobs at some point that, man, when the alarm clock went off, the last thing we wanted to do was get out of bed and go to work. It was just, whether it was the politics or what we were doing, or, and we've all had those dreaded jobs. And I just got to thinking about how unfair that is and how wrong that is. And that the difference between places where I was miserable and places where I leaped out of bed to go to work, the difference wasn't that big a deal. I mean, you know what I mean? There were just certain little things missing, like that people cared about me, that my work had value, that I'd made a difference, that people recognized me for that. And we actually met at a recognition company, which was great fun, because that was right in our bailiwick. I started off selling in broadcast time, and that was kind of my family business. We were all in media. And I love this idea of celebration. We're a very competitive family. So, winning the trophy was always a big deal. Although, being the youngest of 5 brothers, it was rarely me winning the trophy. So that's kind of why we got into it. We thought, these principles of gratitude and recognition are so simple and cost you almost nothing, and yet have such a profound impact on people. And in the most unlikely of circumstances, whether it's, thanking the crossing guard as your kids go to school, or the policeman at the hockey game that, make sure everybody gets across Broad Street, without getting killed. It's always amazing to me, the power of gratitude and how that just lifts people up. So we said, look, there's a ton of data on this. Let's publish it. And our first 7 books that we wrote all had carrot in the title. That's why I wear orange. Adrian, not so much. Adrian's more of a blue. Our colors are orange and blue. I'm the orange. He's kind of the blue. We call it Elton orange and Gostick blue.
Nice.
And the data was there, and the principles were there. And then we studied the best in class leaders and cultures. And that common thread through all of those extraordinary leaders and cultures was always gratitude. And so, yeah, that's kind of how we got into it. We when we wrote our first book, we thought that was amazing. And then that was the pinnacle of what we were going to do. And lo and behold, Anxiety at Work is our 14th book that we've written together. So it's turned out to be quite the passion play.
Amazing, amazing. It's been an incredible journey. Your works are so transformative, and I love the, we've had an opportunity to talk about the power of gratitude. You and I have had an opportunity to be on gratitude chats almost every single day for the last 8 months. We have some great mutual friends that each day we just share what we're grateful for, and it's been transformative in my life. It really has. It's poured over into our work culture in our office. It's poured over into our families. There's such power behind that. I love how you shared the walking across Broad Street analogy there. As we share, we're both big hockey fans. I grew up on Broad Street in Philly, so I appreciate you wearing orange today. Although I know that you're an avid Devils fan, but it looks really, really good on you. It
Yeah,
does.
thank
No, it's so true. I think, so many times we get so busy going and going and doing and doing. We become human doings rather than human beings, that we don't take time to stop and actually think, what is it that we're grateful for? And you have personally helped me on this journey of gratitude over the last year, and I couldn't be more grateful.
Yeah, thank you. It is interesting. Just a quick little hockey note. I do go down once a year. My friend has season tickets. He's a big Flyers fan, and I'm always conflicted because I am a diehard Devils fan, and yet I love those orange jerseys. It's really hard for me to cheer against the. It's like when Edmonton comes to town and they wear their orange jersey. I go, "Damn you!" I really don't want to cheer for you. Um, you make such a wonderful point, though, about simple little rituals, and I'm a big fan of rituals and discipline. And this little WhatsApp chain that we're on, and by the way, it's not like you have to do it every day, right? We invite you to do it when you can, and yet it's kind of addictive because you kind of want to see, what's Davin posting today, what's Gary posting today, what's Karen posting today, and it does. It's a simple way to lift your spirits. You just have to do it, you know. And my wife and I have a wonderful ritual at the end of the day. We say, "What are your three? And what are your three things you're grateful for?" And as you might guess, it's often many more than three. And yet there are those days when you struggle to get to three. The point is there's always three. There's always at least three. No matter how bad your day is, you can step back and say, "You know what? Somebody helped me here. Somebody helped me there. I was in awe of whatever, the sunrise, the sunset, a walk in the park." So I love that, stepping back and just appreciating what is there instead of lamenting what's not there. And I just think it's good for your soul.
So good. So good. And whether it's kind of a chicken and egg conversation, but I've heard it say that your heart set controls your mindset. I've also heard it said that your mindset controls your heart set. They kind of play off of each other a little bit. And for me personally, and this applies at home, it applies at work. Like I said, there's a trickle over effect. And I used to wake up every single morning, and we have our rituals, right? You talked about it. I'd get up, I would read, read a little scripture, think about kind of my day, what I need to get into. I'd get my first cup of coffee. In fact, from a habit standpoint, I always tried to tie habits I wanted to create to my first cup of coffee, because I love coffee. I don't start my day without it, right? It's something that's going to happen. So it's like every time I needed to create a new morning ritual, it was like, okay, that needs to happen before I have my first cup of coffee, or I can't have my coffee. And that's how I created discipline in those rituals. And I've started to do that with gratitude. And I try every single day to put it in our WhatsApp chat. But what you've taught me to do is wake up every single morning with a grateful heart, think, what is it that I'm grateful for today? And then that's now prepared my mindset for the day. It allows me to be more productive. It allows me to show up into the best version of myself and deliver on my purpose, both at home as a spouse and as a father, and at work as a leader, on stage as a speaker, if I'm writing and working on. It's allowed me to show up into the best version of myself because I'm approaching life with a heart set of gratitude. It's so powerful.
Yeah, you mentioned the impact of gratitude that goes beyond. I've got a fun ritual, and there are these gratitude stones. And I love that it's a stone. You give it to people randomly, whether it's guys at the grocery store or whatever. And I always love to give it to them. They're like, "Oh, that's beautiful. Do you make them yourself?" I go, "No, they're available on Amazon." And and I say, "Do you know why it's a stone?" And they go, "No." I said, "Because when you throw a stone into the pond, the water ripples.
Mm.
just like gratitude. So you're very much on point there in my beliefs, is that those simple little acts of gratitude, they do ripple. They do ripple. And starting your day and ending your day in that positive mindset means the world. I read Jay Shetty's book, Think Like a Monk,
Mm.
and loved that book. And in the book, the monks have mantras, and he challenges you in the book to write your own personal mantra. So I thought, well, that'll be really good. So I came up with one, and it was really funny because I love to work with this one producer. He produces a bunch of shows, and he often invites me to be one of his keynote speakers, produces conferences and so on. And I shared it with him, and he actually, if you can see, you can't see it there. It's this little billboard. He made a little billboard for me. It actually lights up. And here's what it says on the billboard. It says, "Be kind, be grateful, be of service."
Mm.
And again, that's my morning ritual. My feet touch the ground and I say, today, remember, be kind, be grateful, and be of service. And like you said, the way you start your day, the way you end your day, helps the middle of your day just be a lot better.
So good. So good. I'm thinking about, and as you pointed over to your sign, right under that sign are your two most recent books, Leading with Gratitude and Anxiety at Work. And, it's when you think about it, anxiety at work is a big deal, big deal right now. You joked about it at the summit. So we can't talk about that. No. We don't talk about Bruno. We don't talk about anxiety at work, right? But it's amazing that the other book to the left of it, Leading with Gratitude, is really the antidote. It's really the medicine for the anxiety. And so, if we could I mean, because you're known as obviously a global guru on leadership and culture, and we could talk all day long about how this impacts our personal lives and at home. And I want to spend some time on that. But I kind of want to talk about the elephant in the room, which is the anxiety at work situation, because we know it's a stat that there's been almost no movement on, that 86% of people every single day are unhappy at work. They are depressed. They're overworked. They feel anxiety. They're leaving one job to go to another job. And it seems like the answer is so simple, but so few leaders and so few cultures get it right. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's wonderful, and thank you for pointing out the books. They really do go hand in hand. We talk about leading with gratitude, 8 strategies to lead with gratitude for extraordinary results. And anxiety at work is 8 strategies to manage anxiety. And the 8th strategy in anxiety at work is gratitude. So, I mean, you're right. It really is the antidote. And it is such a shame, back to why Adrian and I, write our books, is that so many people, work is just drudgery. And why would you put yourself through that every day? And you can rationalize anything, right? Well, I'm doing it for my family. I pay the rent and buy the food. Which, by the way, buying food and paying the rent, those are good reasons to go to work,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I can send my kids to college and so on. The thing is if you can get it to the point where you don't just have to go to work, but you get to go to work. And I was listening to a wonderful podcast that was talking about tolerance, that we've developed this culture of contempt. And our antidote seems to be, well, we need to be more tolerant. And he said, what a low bar. What a low bar. He said, if you said to somebody, so how do your employees feel about you? And you said, well, they tolerate me. You'd say, you're a horrible leader. Or, how's your marriage? My wife, she tolerates me. You'd say, well, you immediately need counseling, So we've got to get to this point where we actually love our work. And in Leading with Gratitude, we talk about assuming positive intent about people. That people really do come to work wanting to do a good job, and they're going to mess up, and that's okay. We solve that problem. The same thing with anxiety is understanding that number that you just called out, 86%. I mean, pre-pandemic, it was about 1 in 5 employees suffered from anxiety disorder. In other words, so anxious they couldn't do their jobs. By 2022, that had jumped to 30%. And in workers in their 20s, it was 42%. I mean, those are stupid numbers.
Yeah.
And yet, you're right, we don't ever talk about it. Why? Because it's not safe. Because we don't trust that either our supervisor, manager, or company will be kind, be understanding, be grateful, and look to help us solve those problems. And isn't that a shame? I was just on this wonderful virtual conference. Our friends, HR leaders out of London, they do a fabulous job. And we were talking about bringing the human element back to work, to humanize work. We would never treat family members often the way we treat our coworkers or people that work with and for us, and bringing that humanity back into the workplace. And I've got to share a great story with you that you'll love, because, well, with you and me, eventually is going to come back to hockey, right? But we talk about the fact that, in business, we're often really good about celebrating the individual, the employee of the month, the salesman, the best, the patent and all that stuff. Our top performers, we're actually pretty good about that. We're not so good about celebrating the team. And I'm on this virtual panel with Sonia and Cien. She's a brilliant, professor down there at Duke. It was actually the executive coach for Mike Krzyzewski, the legendary basketball coach. She said, "You know what I like about hockey?" And now you got to understand, she's in North Carolina. I'm thinking, what do you know about hockey?
Yeah.
Right. And immediately got my attention. She said, "What I love about hockey is the assist." She said, in most games, in most sports, you record the goal and you record one assist. But in hockey, you record 2 assists.
Yes.
It's the pass to the pass to the goal. And in hockey, they're all valued the same. You talk about your points leaders, right? A goal counts for a point. The first assist counts for a point, and the second assist counts for a point. So in other words, you and I could both have 100 points. Yours might be 80 goals and 20 assists, and mine might be 80 assists and 20 goals. We're both 100-point players, which is amazing, right? So I looked it up, because you can't have an unassisted goal. You steal the puck, you score, right? You steal the ball, you make a basket. Do you know what the percent of unassisted goals is in the NHL? Take a guess. Give me a percentage.
Oh, it's got to be low. I'm going to say 5%.
You're exactly right. It's 5%. I can't believe you. Well, you're a fan. Now, here's your next question. How many goals have only 1 assist? What's the percentage?
I'm going to say higher, but not the majority. Let's go with 40.
15.
Wow. Okay.
It's only 15%.
Wow.
So you think about that. 80% of goals have 2 assists.
Wow.
95% of goals have at least 1 assist. And so we came up with this mantra that it's hard to score a goal without an assist.
Yeah.
There's rarely a goal without an assist, which I'm going to make into a bumper sticker. Davin, you and I are going to sell them. And it's going to go right next to our other bumper sticker that says, "My other car is a Zamboni." Now, the reason I kind of go through this, and I love the numbers and the stats, is how often do we forget to celebrate the assist? How often do we forget to thank, the guys that make sure that the customer gets billed, that make sure the contracts are right, legal and accounting, and even the maintenance guys. I have a friend, he said, "You want to have fun? Next time you go to work, call down to the maintenance guys and say, 'Hey, I just want to let you know, the temperature today, perfect. There's not a light bulb that's burned out. You make it so easy for me to do my job. I just want to call and say, you guys are doing a great job.'" He said, 2 things will happen. One is there'll be a pause. The second is they may ask you, "Have you failed your drug test?" And then they will give you a very sincere thank you, because nobody thanks the team, the assist. We don't celebrate the assist as much as you should. And you talk about the power of gratitude and lowering people's anxieties. Those people, we wrote a book, one of my favorites, called The Invisible Employee. All those employees that work so hard every day and yet go home with very little affirmation. And we need to do that. We need to make sure that we're celebrating the assist.
That's so good. So good. It reminds me, I was just in Denver a couple of weeks ago speaking at the Society for Hospitality Food Management Conference. And we were talking about this. We were talking about celebrating how people show up in their purpose every day at work. And, I heard all these great stories about, how they bring the chefs out after they create these meals. And, it's a big honor to come out in your white coat and with the chef hat on and to get the compliments for the meal. And then someone raised their hand and they said, "But what about the dishwasher?"
Exactly.
Like, what do we do for them? What does that look like? How did they see their contribution to the bigger picture? Because no one wants to eat off of a dirty plate. right? And so
That's right.
there's a whole supporting cast that made these assists. And what are we doing to celebrate that? And so we think about recognizing our top performer. We think about gratitude in that sense. But the reality is, and people might say, well, what does this have to do with purpose? Everything, because every role, every job, every person has a purpose, and they want to be seen. They want to know that their work matters. They want to know that they've contributed to whatever the end goal was. But we tend to only celebrate the goal scorer and not the assist maker.
Yeah, I mean, you want to wake up call, go play 1-on-5. Go play one on
Right?
five and see how many goals you score. And that's why, I know sports analogies are overused. The reason is because they make sense and they're easy to visualize, and then can you translate that? Now the same thing applies to our personal lives, right? We talk about gratitude, and I'll often say at a conference, I'm a big fan of handwritten notes. I know it's old school. I just think that tangible, that's why I love this, holiday cards, Christmas cards, New Year's cards and stuff. I love them because, they show up, they're tangible. And there's something magical about that. You set aside time to go through those cards and remember all those friends that maybe you haven't thought of for a year. And I'll often say to the audience, isn't this great? When was the last time you wrote a note to somebody on your team? And a few hands will go up. And I say, by the way, when was the last time you wrote a love note to your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your spouse or your partner? And they all go, it's really interesting. You just see their heads go, oh yeah, I gotta get better at that. And the thing is that what I love about, your work, Davin, and the wonderful reach that you have with your podcasts and your movies and your conferences, is that it isn't about just making better worker bees. It's about making better people.
Yes.
And my favorite data point is the University of California did a study and said people that are happy and engaged at work are 150% more likely to be happy and engaged in their personal lives.
That's right.
Talk about a ripple effect. Talk about a ripple effect. So that's, when Adrian and I do our executive coaching, and I know you do some as well, I find it very, very satisfying. I start every coaching, engagement with saying, look, you'll be a better leader after this. I mean, we've got a formula and a plan, and most of it's just reminding you about stuff you already know that you're just not doing anymore. You've got an accountability partner, right? I said, but if that's all we do, if we make you a better worker, be an executive, will have failed. I want you to write down this quote. I said, grab a Post-it note where you can stick it on your computer screen. And it goes like this. No success in business can ever compensate for failure in your home. It's a wonderful religious leader that I grew up with named David McKay. And I just love that concept. And it comes back to Stephen Covey. Like, what do you want people to say at your funeral, at your wake? And if they said, man, that guy wrote a lot of great books, I'll be crushed. That's right. Who wants on their tombstone, man, that guy could close a sale. You want great dad, great friend, great father, made people feel good about themselves. That's what you want on your tombstone. And yet we spend 85% of our day, at work, and have we got it in prayer? So I'm babbling here, but that's what the apostle of appreciation does. He just babbles. So
no, you babble wisdom. No, it's profound truth that we need to be reminded of every single day. I mean, one of our mutual friends, Gary Ridge, who also spent some time with us at the summit and is on our daily gratitude messages, and was in the movie with you, the Purpose Summit Experience movie that also plays and repeat in my head. What you talk about ripple effects, you talk about happiness at work, you talk about happiness at home, and he's constantly saying that, when we create places where people not only come to work happy, but they leave work happy, then they go home, and what happens? We create happy workers, create happy families create happy communities create a happy world, and we need a happy world, right? And that's the ripple effect that he talks about. And you share the tombstone story. One of my favorite poems is The Dash. I'm sure everyone's heard about The Dash, and it's that line in between your birth year and your final year here on this planet. And what does that dash represent? When people talk about your life and who you were, did they talk about what you did or your title or what you were known for, or did they talk about how you made them feel? Did they talk about the impact that you have? Did they talk about who you helped them become? Because at the end of the day, and one of my favorite quotes is, at the end of the day, all that matters is how we help people feel, how we help people think, and who we help them become. And I mean, that's it. And are you measuring those things? And that's what I love about your work, in what you do in the consulting space and the culture works, and in your executive coaching space, is you're constantly challenging leaders. Hey, when you leave people, how'd you make them feel? How did you make them think? Who are you helping them become? And it's such a simple formula. I know you said it's babbling, but now I'm babbling. It's profound truth that needs to be repeated over and over and over again until it becomes subconscious that people do it every single day.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I love about Gary Ridge is, he just recently retired from WD-40, but he would get up ridiculously early. He's the earliest riser of anybody I know. But he would go to work and he would stand at the front door and welcome people to work every morning. And he said the three most important words that any leader can memorize and use often is, I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah. And it's real. I was just in California and had a chance to spend time in San Diego at WD-40's headquarters, which they've now recently changed the name of. I'm not allowed to say the previous name anymore, but I think the new name is going to be the campus or something like that. And it was his last week there, and he was kind of giving me a tour. And these aren't just words that someone says that it sounds good. I mean, this culture lived it out. I mean, talk about a case study of what good looks like. But it's also a testimony to the fact that you become, a product of the people that you surround yourself and the books that you read. And so iron sharpens iron. And I know you guys have been friends for a very long time. He's a big fan of your work. You're a big fan of his. You guys have a lot of conversations, right?
Yeah.
There's a reason that culture was the way that it was. And, I kind of want to, if you would, because this has all been real feel good talk for the last, 20 or so minutes that we've been talking. But I still feel like there is still a global pandemic and epidemic. And I'm not talking about COVID. I'm talking about this idea of anxiety, hopelessness, a lack of mattering, a lack of being seen at work. And everyone talks about maybe the problem. They maybe know what the solution is, but I want to ask kind of a very direct question. What do you think the number one barrier is? Why are we not making any movement? I mean, you got people like you and me and so many others that write great books and say all these great things and have all these great podcasts and have conferences and all of that. Like, what is the holdup? How do we penetrate? So, I mean, seriously, it seems like the answer is so simple, but the movement is so slow.
Yeah, a couple of things. I want to add a couple of words to your list there. I've got a nephew, Chester Elton, that I just adore. He's just so smart and so good. And I asked him, what do you think the opposite of gratitude is? And the word he came up with was entitlement. So I think, unfortunately, along with all those things that you listed, we've kind of developed a bit of a culture of entitlement. That I deserve this. And I grew up in radio. My dad was an announcer and then he ran radio stations. And so we'd always dissect like the marketing and the commercials and stuff. And the commercials I hate more than any are the car commercials that say, you get the car that you deserve. And then they say, it doesn't matter if you're divorced or bankrupt or in jail or drug addled or homeless. We can get you into the car you deserve. And I think, what? What are you talking about? That no matter how irresponsible we've been, somehow we're entitled to this new car or whatever. So I just wanted to kind of put that in there. I think, we're constantly battling a little bit of that, not a little bit, sometimes a lot of the entitlement attitude. I think the biggest barrier to most people, particularly leaders, is fear. It's just fear. They're afraid that if they give a lot of gratitude, they give a lot of recognition, that somehow it diminishes them. That, well, if my team is so great, what do they need me for? Or if I'm praising Davin so much, how come he doesn't have my job? And there's this fear of somehow that I'll be soft, I'll be taken advantage of. Somehow all my praise and recognition is going to somehow diminish me and make me less. And I think there's a real fear out there, that I want to be that great leader. You gave me the promotion. I want to prove it out. And it's really unfortunate because as you and I have seen so many times, and Gary Ridge is a perfect example of that. here's a leader that leads with gratitude every minute of every day. And did he get results? Oh my gosh. Like you say, he's the Harvard case study for, going from what was it, 250 million or something to 3.3 billion. And that's real money, and real growth. And you talk to the people that work at WD-40 and they love going to work. They love each other. They love what they do. And Davin, I mean, it's grease. Do you know what I mean? It's grease in a can. This is not the cure for cancer. This is not, a perpetual motion machine. It's grease. If you can do it with grease, trust me, whatever it is you're doing at your job, you can make that happen. So a long rambling answer, but I think people are just afraid. They're afraid that if they're genuine, if they show themselves to be a little vulnerable, that somehow they're being perceived as weak. And I think that's a real shame.
That's so true. You talk a lot about how do we make it safe to talk about anxiety at work? How do we make it safe to talk about what you just talked about? How do we make it safe to talk about fear? Like, are you afraid that if you give the level of gratitude and recognition that it's going to be self-diminishing? How do we make it safe to talk about the fact that people are dealing with anxiety that needs to be addressed? Because we could call it out, but what do you think is the roadblock for cultures and leadership to actually embrace it and say, you know what, we need to tackle this like we tackled COVID. We need to give it that level of attention.
Yeah. The easiest way, and again, it takes courage, is share your story. One of the remarkable leaders that I got to know over COVID was Nabila Extalaban. She's the chief people officer up in Canada for Walmart. She's the chief people officer for 100,000 employees. Can you imagine? That's 100,000 people, And the first thing she does is she introduces herself as a recovering workaholic. That she always thought from a very young age that if you didn't put an 80-hour week, if you weren't always the best, if you didn't always deliver, that somehow you were diminished. And she said, it cost me. It cost me my health. It cost me my mental health. It cost me my marriage. Now, I want to tell the rest of the story here because this is where it becomes really poignant. She shares this with her groups. If she can talk about it, it's safe for you to talk about it. She's the chief people officer. Well, in one of the meetings, somebody challenged her and said, Nabila, I think that's great that you're sharing your story, but it worked for you. Like, you're the chief people officer at Walmart. Would you have been the chief people officer had you not made all those sacrifices? Great question, right? And she said, oh, there's no question I would still be the chief people officer. It would have taken me longer. And knowing what I know now, I would make that trade.
Wow.
That's powerful.
Wow. So good.
Yeah. So the point is if you want to make it safe, tell your story. It's like anything. You want to be Gary Ridge, you watch what Gary Ridge does and you do that. Well, if you've got a leader that is willing and really grateful and coaching people up and admits they don't know when they don't know and asks for help when they need help and says, you know what? I get burned out too. If you get really burned out and you need a mental health day, don't you worry 1 second that's going to affect your promotion or your raise or your assignments. We all need a mental break. And I always love to go back to the numbers and say, 42% of your workers in their 20s are suffering from debilitating anxiety. Well, if 42% of your 25-year-olds showed up with broken legs, you'd be all over that. Because it's so visual and so obvious. Well, anxiety isn't as visual and it's not as obvious. And yet, if you can tell your story and make it safe, odds are people will be genuine and it will be safe. And you know what? You'll attract really smart people because, the smartest people I know are the most anxious people I know. They just are. It's so funny. At a conference the other day, I said, how many of you have somebody on your team that's just killing it? Raise their hand. No assignment is too tough. No deadline. Yeah, absolutely. I said, and what do we do with those top performers? We load them up.
Give them more.
We give them more. We just keep feeding that beast, and everybody starts laughing. I said, do you think they're a little anxious? And they all, yeah. I said, look, they're the ones you need to be the most careful because they'll never admit it and they'll never say no. So yeah, share your story, be watchful, be caring, make it safe. And then strategy number 8, my favorite, is use gratitude as a way in. Say, man, Davin, I can't tell you how much I appreciate those little notes you send me every day on gratitude. Thank you so much for inviting me to your conferences. I meet the most extraordinary people. I have the best memories. It wouldn't happen without you. Thank you, my friend.
So good. I what you just said, I know you were using example, but I also know that you were being truthful, and I appreciate that. That means so very, very much to me. I know we both share a passion to want to see leaders step into the fullness of this, to want to see the world embrace these thoughts, these principles, and actually create cultures where people feel safe to talk about the things that they're struggling with, and they get the level of support and empathy and care that they need from their leaders. That we bring humanity back into this. That these just aren't tactics for performance. That these are real, true, applicable principles to create well-being, to create mattering, to create purpose, to create a ripple effect, not only just in our workplaces, but in our homes, in our communities, and across the world, as our friend Gary says. And as we only have a couple minutes left, and as we're wrapping up, I can't help but feel or think that there's someone listening to this right now that's saying, this all sounds great, but I'm still struggling, or I don't have a leader that embraces this, or I don't have a culture that embraces this, or I don't know where to start. And so, if you could leave our listeners kind of with one last thought that applies to them personally, that is on your heart to share with them, what would it be?
Thank you for that. There's a wonderful quote by Amy Edmondson, not Amy Edmondson, but Brene Brown, that I just love. And she said, is it gratitude that brings us joy, or is it joy that brings us gratitude? And she said, it's gratitude that brings us joy. When we are grateful, we are more joyful. So start with the gratitude. One of my favorite practices is in the morning. You're going to think this is weird, but I'm going to tell you anyway. There literally are 29 people on my list, and I find a fun little quote. Sometimes it's humorous, sometimes it's profound, almost always about kindness and gratitude and forgiveness and so on. And I text it to them every morning.
Wow.
And it is such a joy for me to do it. It gives me a reason to get up early because I know people are waiting for it. And the responses, the little hearts, the little thumbs up, the little emojis, the little, hey, I really needed that today. So if you feel uncomfortable giving gratitude, a text is easy. Just text somebody. And there was a wonderful article in the New York Times the other day that said random texts, random little touches, random little phone calls mean more than you think to people. So those random acts of kindness, just start there. Start with texts. And, just in closing, back to the ripple effect. I love organizations like WD-40, like American Express, like so many of these great companies that we've worked with, that lead with gratitude. It is a great way to lead. It's an even better way to live.
Ooh.
Put it in your life. Write a love note to your partner and your kids, and never let them leave the house without knowing how much you love them. My father was married for 65 years to the love of his life. I never heard my father ever raise his voice to my mother. I grew up in a ridiculously happy household. And as we got together after my father died, my 4 brothers and I, we went around and said, what was the greatest lesson Dad taught you? And my brother Kim said, you know what? I think the best lesson he taught all of us was how to love your wife, how to love your family. And I tell my wife all the time, my job is to make sure that you don't doubt for a second how much I love you. And so far, so good.
So good. So good. Well, I could tell you that just that little bit of advice there, our daily message of gratitude, I've found myself leaving notes more around for Amy, being more intentional and spending time with my kids and telling them what I'm grateful for. And so this ripple effect that you are leading and stewarding has poured into my life. It's poured into the lives of those in our office and the lives of those that we are blessed and get to touch. And I, my friend, am truly grateful for the indelible mark that you have left on my life and all those that I get to touch every single day. So thank you.
Likewise, my friend. Thank you so much for this time. It's meant the world to me.
Absolutely. We've got one last thing to do before we wrap up, and that's for those listening today. We've talked about your books, we've talked about your works. Where can they follow you? Where can they connect with you? How can they engage with you more so that you can have the ripple effect in their life that you've had in mind?
Excellent. Thecultureworks.com. That's where you can find all our good stuff, our books, our coaching, our training, and all that. Follow me on LinkedIn. We've got a wonderful newsletter we put out twice a month called the Gratitude Journal. I was joking with you that, there's a lot of hockey references. You're going to love that. We have 255,000 subscribers. So there's a lot of goodness comes out of that. And we have a wonderful podcast, Anxiety at Work. Treat yourself. We bring in wonderful counselors and psychologists and lots of business leaders. And how do they manage their anxiety that I know will help you and hopefully friends of yours to manage theirs as well. So LinkedIn, the podcast, and thecultureworks.com, 3 great places.
So good. Thank you, my friend. I am so grateful for you. Thank you to all of those listening today. Chester, I look forward to seeing. There it is, the gratitude rock. I still have the stone that you gave me at the Purpose Summit last year. I carry it with me everywhere I go as a constant reminder. I hope that you, if you're listening to this today, that you take the insights, the things that Chester shared, that you carry them with you wherever you go so that you can step into the fullness of your purpose, that you can not just lead with gratitude, but live with gratitude and make a difference in the lives that you get to touch every day to create that ripple effect that Chester talked about. Chester, thank you again so much. Appreciate you. And for those of you listening, we'll see you next time on the What Good Looks Like podcast.